All right, this is the October 22nd meeting of the Dallas After Effects User Group. Let's hear it. Yeah, okay. We're going to share the screen here.
Hey, Trent.
Hey, Jeremy.
How you doing?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you. What's up, people?
All right, so there's the screen. We're going to go to the desktop. And we are working on tonight creating a countdown and doing some compositing. So we have John Ruiz and we have Chad Gilmore here. John, if you're ready to go ahead and hit it. Oh,
dude, that Chad Gilmore guy is incredible.
He is cool. All right. There you go.
Thanks, Trent.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm John. I'm tonight's opening act. I did a countdown for Graceway, and Trent asked me to share on what happened. Is that just a projector? So Trent asked me to share on how we did it. There are a lot of ways to build the countdown. I'm just going to show on just how I did the numbers. And I just did basic shape tool. The whole thing was made out of shape tools, one image, and the pen tool. And so it's a pretty simple thing. There's a lot of scripts or other ways to make a countdown just by yourself, but I wanted to have basically the numbers animate in a way that it all came from a single point. And so it would come out of a point and come loop back into a point and shoot back out with the next number. I kind of got the idea off of I saw this clock, this watch commercial, and then
let's do something here. Let's go gracewaymedia.com. You can see the countdown.
Yeah.
Here it is. Let's take a look at there, see how the numbers pop out. Got a little floopty-floop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been in the position, like when I first started, I built a lot of countdowns for the church that I was working for, and I did that, it was before I knew about scripts and all the other ways to do it. So it was a composition with a ton of, measuring it out, duplicating it, and that was rough. So Trent introduced me to the wonderful world of expressions, and I have here, I'm trying not to take too much time. I have a timeline. It's pretty much already built. So we have the numbers here. I'm just going to break down how I built the numbers by just doing two real quick, and then we'll throw in a timeline, and then we'll be done. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free just to interrupt me at any old time. So I am going to nix the 0 and the 9. Let's see here. So, and we will start over. So the first thing I did is get guides and figure out exactly what I wanted to do. The numbers I just kind of generated from, I used several different fonts, and then some of the numbers I just made up because I wanted, like I said, I was inspired by a commercial I saw, but I didn't want to rip them off. So I just made up my own numbers and whatnot. And again, we start with the pen tool is where I start. So I'm just going to create the first number. And that's pretty much the first shape. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Okay.
Tell you what, we're looking at only your face.
Oh dear.
On the recording.
Yeah, we don't want that. Nobody wants that.
So we're going to go to screen share. And entire screen. Hopefully that does it.
Hopefully. Okay, Cool. So we're just gonna put the pin, and again, a lot of it is just kind of predetermining what my parameters are going to be. So I decided it's going to be roughly about six frames in, 6 frames out. And so it's just starting on a, I get my shape, I put my playhead exactly where I want it to be. So I'm just going to count 6 frames. And then we're going to put our first marker, and I like to design first and then work my way back.
The page up and page down keys jump forward 1 frame.
Yep. And if yeah, page.
I'm just gonna yell random.
No, yeah, please do, because I don't think through steps. I just kind of do it. Yeah. And then for this, I just set a keyframe for my path.
Does page up go forward 1 frame?
Mm-hmm.
Page up is forward, page down is back.
Then holding down Shift jumps it in increments of 10 frames.
Okay.
Yeah. So then so we start with our 0. This one looks a little crappy, so I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Oh, you have the natural scroll on, don't you?
I didn't mean it. What I do?
The natural scroll. The pen tool and the vertex, convert vertex tool, and then the vector, your normal selection tool. Do y'all do a lot with shapes ever? Like, I've been on this big shape kick. I don't know what it is, but they're very powerful, and I've been using them a whole lot more than I usually have. And so these 2 tools do the same thing, but in different ways. So sometimes I'll do something and screw it up, but just remember that they operate kind of in little different ways. So once I got my shape, I'll basically just move it, use the page up, jump back, and then now that I set my first keyframe, I just kind of manipulate it a little bit. It's kind of just a frame by frame thing of what you want it to be, and then move it down a little bit, bring this guy up. Oops. See, with this one, if you when you're in your vertex tool, if you hold down Command, then you can grab it. If not, if you grab it and move it, you start to put Bezier curves, and that's not what you want. It gets annoying real quick. You screw up, just undo it, and you're good. And a lot of this, I just kind of trial and error until I found something that actually looked cool. Oops, he did it again. I think originally I wanted it to start off as a almost like a small line that draws out. So I'll leave one little guy up. Let's see here. And some of the settings to make your line look cool is empty frames over here. So in the last one, we'll bring it in, and I just kind of zoomed all the way in and made sure that they were all kind of in a spot, very close together, like so. And to get rid of, if I wanted to make an actual circle, jumping down in my stroke, there's a lot of options to make your thing look smoother. So I'll just make it all round, and then we've got it.
So essentially, you could like stop the whole area on a logo, right? Like you could end it on a logo, and then it changes.
Yeah. It's all. I mean, when you keyframe. Oh, wait, say that one more time. I want to make sure I answer correctly.
Okay, so right here we already have like a closed area, right? That closed area could be essentially a logo.
Exactly. That's how I pretty much animate everything. For you bring in a logo, you bring in, if it's all these different layers, you always want to set a keyframe for how you want it to start, how you want it to finish. I'm sorry, and then work yourself backwards. So it's hard to bring in something, you start animating it, and then you got to repiece it together down the line. So jump your playhead to where, it should, after about 2 seconds, the logo should be complete. Then make a keyframe for everything there, and then jump it back and start doing it. And often, depending on the type of logo, sometimes it's easy to recreate things because they'll bring you in, whether if it's a Photoshop file and they have a line, sometimes it's easier to recreate it. Or if it's an Illustrator file, you could jump into your layer and it's a convert, get the name right, create shapes from vector file and different things, because it gives you having a line in Photoshop or having an Illustrator file and then being able to convert it to a vector or a shape or a mask gives you a whole nother set of options. So you're not going to be able to bend it, you know, like for example, just a line. You wouldn't be able to bend it from a Photoshop file. You need or an Illustrator file. An Illustrator file, you just convert it to a shape tool, and then you can do whatever the heck you want to it, add points or whatever. So what I did here then, so the animation, zoom out a little bit. So that's it. It's pretty simple. And then what I did is I just highlighted the keyframes, copied them, and then we'll count. I know that's supposed to be 1 second, so we'll just put it there and go back 6 frames and paste them. And then all you got to do is, you know, with them highlighted, right click, time reverse keyframes, and it just flips them on the other side. So now we got a circle that animates on and animates off. Again, with time, I tweaked it to actually make it a little bit more, look a little better. But the principle is pretty much that. It's all the letters animate on and animate off. And then I'll do, we'll just knock out one more real quick. Jump back to my pen tool. With nothing selected, it creates a new layer for you. If you have something selected, you'll actually be creating a brand new shape. So nothing selected, so.
If it's a shape layer, you'll create a shape. If it's a different kind of layer, you'll create a mask.
Yeah.
So just be aware that you have something or nothing selected.
Yeah, and I also want to just trim this sucker out. So that way, an option right bracket will trim it out. I trimmed it out. Frame too early. Here it is. And then the next shape, page down, will start from that exact point. But again, I want to jump a few frames. And then we'll create our 9. Why?
Because you're on the plus.
Oh, thank you, Trent. It would have taken me a few minutes to figure that out. I would have. I do that all the time. Great. So normally when you drop your stuff, this thing usually you have your fill and everything selected. If you hold down Option and just click on Fill, it's a shortcut to filter through. So we want to turn off our fill, and then we want to add a stroke, and then you can just boost that. And I need to actually scroll down and see what this one is. I had it at 12 and at white. So we'll just pop in 12 and change this color to white. And then it's a bit of a rinse and repeat. Just do this exact same thing. We're going to set a keyframe for how we like it for our path, and then we'll just go up a frame and start tweaking it, and we'll change it to the vertex tool, or even the selection tool would be just fine. Does anyone have any questions up until this point?
Yeah, can you delete anchor points?
You can't delete an anchor point.
I'm sorry, not anchor points. The vertices.
Yeah, see what I did is I originally, again, when I first built this from scratch, I started off with, I was like, I'll just start off with the shape that's got the most points, and then I started jacking with it instead of, I was basically duplicating a layer and then messing with it. But yeah, it's really easy. If all your points are selected, sometimes it's hard, like if you're in this tool and you select off it, it can get kind of frustrating. You start pushing on, you're like, I'm not getting my points back. Just click on Path, and then your points are highlighted. And you can hold down Shift and click a point, and then click back on it, and then deleting it. And then you can delete points that way.
You can jack up your animation though. If you've already done a sequence or a bunch of keyframes and you delete a point, that could.
Well, I guess what I was thinking was to have it draw on. Can you remove, like, can you keyframe and remove? Yeah, vertices.
So are you saying?
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
You want it to build from here up like that?
Yeah.
There's a thing you can do inside the shape layer tool.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll talk about that.
You can trim your stroke.
Yeah, so right here is a little add button, and this is, again, what makes Shape Tools so powerful, because there's all these things you can add and do with them. So all you got to do here is go to a trim paths, and it adds another section here. So if you just scroll that down, you've got now a start and an end. So then you can have the guy, draw on or whatever you want to do. So trim paths is something I'm actually working on a project right now, and we've been doing nothing but trim paths. There's like a million different lines in that thing. So again, the edges are kind of not what I was looking for. So we'll go to in your reversed direction thing.
Does that trim path thing work if the path crosses?
Yeah, it can. I mean, you can have are you saying it crosses itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it follows the order in which you drew the points. It follows it. So you can have it crisscross all you want. It's gonna follow the original path how you click them on. So like if this guy over here crossed like that, it would still I think I deleted it. Put it back on. It'll do it the way, the order in which you drew it on. So you can do a million uses with trim paths. Those are good questions. So next, I'll just back it up keyframe, and we'll manipulate it a wee bit. Throw it in, da-da-da. And I think in my original stuff, I gave like a somewhat of a circular motion to it, so it kind of did that. And we'll just make it real quick. And I think we all understand this concept. Does anyone else have any other questions before I jump to the next part? Because again, the shapes are something that I use, but I never understood the power of them. It's like lately Trent's been teaching on text animators. And for the life of me, they were frustrating as all get out, so I never really learned them. And once I actually learned them, crap, they're powerful. They can do a lot. And the same thing with shapes. It's like, well, what can you do with drawing on a square? And it's a simple path. There's a lot you can do to shapes to make them interesting as you go. So that is that. I am going to now, let's just say, so I showed you how to build that. So we've got, this thing is so small. Hold on. Okay, so these are the two new shapes that I created. But since they're ugly, I'm just going to turn back on my original ones. And we have our timeline here. And the next thing we need to do, we have the seconds. Now we need to build the tens. So for that, I've created another sequence. And this is actually, so basically it's a pre-comp. And there is a, one of the big things Trent has taught me is expressions. It's something.
John teaches me stuff too. Just so you
I taught him one thing. One thing. But I felt good about it.
me too.
But yeah.
Daily.
So Trent's been teaching me expressions, and they are incredibly powerful and incredibly hard. But once you can start using them, they make your life so much easier. So what I did before, again, my old stuff was having, by the end of it, 400 layers because I was just duplicating the stuff, and that can all be solved with a single expression that makes your life easier, and that's the loop expression. So what I have here is I brought the seconds pre-comp composition, made it pre-comp, dropped it right into my timeline, which my timeline was set to 5 minutes in this case, and I added a time remap. And so if you go up here to layer, time, enable time remapping, what it does, and there's a lot you can do with time remapping as well. So actually, I'm going to delete this and just start over. So we'll bring our seconds in, and that is a real cute. Let me solo it. So again, all we have is this guy right here, but we need to run the length of it. So if you were to go here to layer, time remapping, this is great if you have a video that basically when you remap it, it gives you a keyframe at the beginning and the end, and so you can slow stuff down, you can speed it up, you can put a keyframe right in the middle and drag out the last one to have it go fast and all of a sudden go slow. So I mean, there's a lot you can do with time remapping, but after we've applied it, we're actually going to apply an expression. And to do that, we'll just hold down Option and click right here on the stopwatch, and we're going to apply a loop out, which is basically going to, as soon as it's over, it's just going to start from the beginning and loop right into it. So we're going to type in loop, capital O, U-T, parentheses. And inside of it, we're going to put, in quotes, the word cycle. And now, the before we had a little, little triangle that, hey, it's the end of your jazz, you can't extend it out. Now that's gone, and we can totally extend it out. And now, once it reaches 2, 1, and we're right back to the start, and you can just extend it all the way out. And so now our seconds are nice and taken care of, which that is the hard part because there's so many seconds.
So many seconds.
So many seconds.
And so that becomes your 10 seconds and your minutes.
Well, the tens and then the minutes I just did separately. So what I did is I jumped in here, and I was like, come here, you 5, and I took the 5, copied it, and then I stuck the 5. Let me unsolo it. So then, or like, for example, it starts off at a 5, and then it jumps, into the 4 seconds. My thing's all out of whack because I, messed it up just now. But I have to grab my my expression and actually put it in the right spot, in the seconds spot. And so down here, I mean, essentially you could build a composition and do the exact same thing, but hold, instead of each layer staying on for just a second, you can have it stay on for 10 seconds, and then put that in there, and again use that same loop expression. So you build it once and do it. When I originally built it, I just duplicated it because there's only 10 layers, and just slid it on over, duplicated it, slid it on over. So you can see here where I have, these are my my tens, and then so this would be 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And then I initially just grabbed these guys and then duplicated them and slid them on over.
Yeah, I see.
But essentially, what you could do is pre-comp them. Compose 10, and again we'll apply that same looping expression. But before we do that, let's enable time remapping. Add our expression, and we'll type in loop. And loop out and cycle.
So there are several things you can do inside there. You can do cycle, which gets to the end here and then goes back like that. That also will work if you just put parentheses at the end. Loop out, just parentheses. That's the default is cycle. You also have ping pong,
There's not a whole lot of light there.
or as the Chinese call it.
I got your back.
Ooh.
Nice.
Ooh. Ooh.
Too much light.
Light show.
Maybe the third thing you did.
Light show.
Is that better?
That's fine.
So ping pong just goes like that, back and forth between the keyframes. And you have continue, continue.
So you said there's a lot about expression.
Continue. As I spell it, continue. And it looks at the what's going on between your keyframes. It looks at the speed, it looks at the rate, direction, and all that on X and Y if you have that happening. So if something's going like this, then when it gets to that last keyframe there, if it's doing continue, it'll just maintain that direction and speed. Okay. So you have cycle, ping pong, and continue. Sorry, John.
No, that's good. And so for the countdown, cycle works the best, but
Can we still see
There's
this?
yeah, there's the expressions can get quite intense, and so the only way to learn expressions is just to do them, even when you don't know them. And there's a lot of websites. There's a Dan Eberts, right?
Yeah.
Dan Eberts is the authority, I feel, on expressions, and so but Linda has got a lot of tutorials. There's a lot of things that once you start with simple ones, you'll find that you start using them for everything. So now with the projects I build, there's expressions, at least 2 or 3 of them that I'm using all the time for everything. Even if it's something simple like you don't even need to write out expressions. We'll just do a quick little side thing. So I'll write a word that says Spurs.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah. And then we'll do another layer over here that says
Wait a minute.
this. Okay, so if I want, where's my text? Where's my other text layer at?
It's layer 12.
So I have like no real estate down here. There we go. Okay. So we can throw this fella down, and using the pick whip tool for expressions, you can link things up real easy. So this is just a quick example. So we've got Spurs, and we want this layer over here. Maybe it's buried into another pre-comp or it's whatever. And you just connect these suckers, add an expression, use your pick whip, drop it to the source text here. So now whenever this changes, Cowboys, they both change. So I mean, there's like a million ways to use expressions. You don't even need to necessarily know how to write them all, but just kind of learning how you can pick whip things, connect layers, and just start getting your hands a little wet and dirty, and you'll start picking it up a lot quicker than you think possible. But that's a side note on expressions. My favorite quote from Trent ever was, I got my wife, I got my kid, I got expressions. That's all he
I
needs.
need to put Jesus in there.
Yeah, he fits somewhere in there. But yeah, the expressions are wonderful. So,
Okay, any questions for John on this? It's good stuff. It's cool. Make sure you understand it before you leave.
and all the other things that we built on here, like with the every other line, everything, there. Should go back to the beginning. Oh, we'll just use this example. So like, that's a terrible example. Here we go. So everything we built for this entire set is just a shape tool. It's basically a rectangle, and then and a circle. And so that's it. So start playing with shape tools because they're a lot more powerful than I think sometimes we just don't know how powerful they are. But
That's right.
any other questions? Awesome. Thank you guys.
We gave it a John. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Chad Gilmore. Let's welcome Chad to the stage.
If you're excited for more expressions,
You'll be disappointed.
I think I have one in maybe.
Oh,
So-
making money with my mouse and my Wacom.
Oh, wait, come on.
Dude, you rock.
All right. So, actually, I should probably show you what we're making first, huh?
Go to Safari.
Oh,
Quickly, go to Safari.
No,
quickly.
I'm enthralled. I looked too far into it. See, I have to log in to see it because I was told to hide it.
Is that Anna's?
Never.
That's it. Beauty.
So this, I'm showing you, I'm going to go over one shot, maybe two in this, depending.
This is super appropriate for this particular week, this particular month.
It's not the darkness you have to fear. It's what lurks within.
Six Flags Fright Fest. Terror beyond anything you've ever faced before. And the scariest coasters on the planet in the jar. Get monstrous savings at SixFlags.com or buy a 2015 season pass and get Fright Fest admission free. Presented by Snickers.
Scream bigger. Go Six Flags.
So I'm going to go over this guy right here, quick how we did that. So probably the key to making this was shooting him, and I'll show you this in that raw footage. We did a studio shoot here in town. We brought in a Hollywood like kind of level makeup artist and gave her a lot of time. She actually had custom prosthetics made for some of the pieces. Is pretty cool. So we will, if I can find where that.
So your clips are right there in the clip.
So first I'm going to go over cutting out that roller coaster, and I'm going to go over some. Don't save. Some rotoscoping techniques and just some different ways of working with footage that may be a little difficult or compressed. So here is the, this is the raw shot. So I've converted it to ProRes, but this is the, where is it? This is the chunk we're looking for right here. So not the best. I think it was shot on a Canon or something, so the compression isn't the best. I wish I could just click on the black and make it disappear, but it doesn't work quite that well. What's that?
Is that the Titan?
That is, yep. Actually, no, that's Goliath out in LA. It's the same coaster though. But anyways, so this is the shot. I brought it in. I've just dropped it into a sequence or into a comp and trimmed it. So we just have that, nothing fancy going on here. So let's see, let me dig into my project here. So I like to, when I work with footage, I like to comp it first. I never drop the footage in and just start hacking it apart and doing a bunch of stuff. I like to apply all my effects and stuff to the comp that it's in. So we've got this guy right here, and I've put it in this one right here. So I'm going to start over this, get rid of this. So this is just a pre-comp of this footage sitting in here. I haven't done anything to it yet. And so one of the, when you're rotoscoping, one of the, does everybody know what rotoscoping is? Do we understand? It's the process of extracting an element from footage, usually with masking or whatever. So, and there's a lot of different ways of doing that. One way is, I wanted to kind of talk about this because I worked with someone that was going to rotoscope something for me. And so he went in and he went like this and made 1 billion points around a train and said, what do you think of this? And he had done one frame and it took him 30 minutes. And I said, great, now how are you going to do the next 150 frames? So one of the things I like to do is try to make it as easy as possible and do as little masking as possible, and try to make, the key is to make as few points and keyframes as possible. So I like to start off with doing just a garbage mat, which is just kind of cutting around your subject. And we can be a little loosey-goosey with these. And hit M to get your mask path. And what I like to do is I like to kind of start in the middle and work my way backwards and forwards. So I can pull this up here. And if you double click on a point, you get control of all of them, kind of like Photoshop. And if you shift alt click, it'll shrink the whole thing proportionally like that. And so that doesn't match up quite well yet, but we will get there. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it's a lot easier once you kind of set a general path your mask is traveling. You're moving these points a lot less every time you move them, as opposed to if I had just started here and gone forward a couple frames and then adjusted them and gone forward So now the mask is sort of traveling with me, and my efforts are kind of minimized here.
Ramsey just reminded me that there are restrooms easily accessible here. If you get super thirsty, let me know, and I'll give you some water. We have Sonic Ice.
And when you're kind of working with masks, sometimes, people will just click on one and then move one. But you can highlight multiple points at a time and double click them, and now you get this little control box over multiple points, which will save your life.
What did you say was a better method than moving a couple frames at a time?
So if I would have, so I've got this mask here, right? Sorry, and if I say, all right, I'm gonna go a couple here, move, and this, and go a couple more up. Just the way I work and the way my brain works, it's a little bit easier to kind of set points at the beginning and end, so your mask is moving a little bit more with you. So
You're letting the software do the interpretation.
right. So the mask is, so it's kind of like taking passes at it. I'm not nailing this perfect mat right off the bat. I'm setting a couple keyframes to get the general motion, and I keep coming back and refining it, pass after pass. Because if you just keep moving a couple frames forward and then adjusting, you may actually be setting more keyframes than what you're needing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just too tedious.
It is extremely tedious and mind-numbing. It is. It's
really well paid.
But there, there's a saying, right? The meat and potatoes of visual effects are tracking and rotoscoping. So if you can't do those two things well, your effect shot is worthless. So, and kind of what I do, I do a lot of kind of sky replacement and stuff. So, and I did this project before they had the little mask tracker, but I tried that, and that doesn't work so well because it doesn't shift the mask. The mask doesn't change shape while it travels. It maintains that same shape. I'll show in a second here.
How about
Gilmore,
Mocha?
question. Did you create that snake?
The snake.
I saw that reel of yours.
Yes. Sort
That
of.
big giant snake with the red eyes that was on that roller coaster.
Yeah, I can talk about that after we do this.
Okay.
If that's all right. So we kind of get, a basic kind of garbage mat here. And sorry, I had to write notes because I did this so long ago. So once we get the mask and switch it to add mode, so now I'm just working with that. Duplicate this, and I'm going to attempt to remove some of the black out of here. And the reason I did the mask first was because when I'm keying colors out of this, I don't need to worry about the colors over here or here or here or here. I only need to worry about keying the colors that are directly around inside of my mask here. Does that make sense why I would do that? So where's your... I need the effects thing you can type in and get the effect.
Command 5.
There we go. So there's an effect called extract. I don't know if anybody's used this, but it's kind of like a Luma key. It cuts out white or black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this in. But when I do this, you can see it tears into my people and my train because of those harsh shadows. So I'm going to go a little heavy on this. and try to bring it back with some other options here. I wanted to go over too one more way. Like I wanted to kind of show a few different ways of generating masks and mats. Sometimes it's better to look at your color channels too. So right here you can see red, green, blue. That's alt 1, 2, 3. And sometimes you can use your color channels themselves to generate mats. Like red there seems like that could be a decent Luma mat. So I'm going to put on the RGB threshold. And with this, it gives you some pretty funky results, but it's kind of a way of isolating down to certain colors.
So if you were trying to match somebody against the blue sky,
Right.
you can use the blue channel.
And one way I like to use this too is setting my hue all the way down so it's just a black and white image, and then adjusting this, you know, somewhere around here. So now you're thinking everything's white or everything's gray. That's not going to work. But I can bring on my levels effect, and now I can crush this down. So now I've got more of a black and white Luma mask, or a layer that I can use for a Luma mask. So that's this layer. And if I, let's see, duplicate this guy, bring it up under here. So I've got this layer and this layer, and if I set the bottom one to Luma Matte, so my bottom layer here, layer 8, is looking at the white information on the layer above it and saying these pixels will be solid and the black pixels will be transparent, like that. So now I've got a way of kind of using my color channels to work for me a little bit better. So that key is a little bit, you can see this is using the RGB threshold. This is with extract, and there's not a big difference, but when you add them on top of each other, they kind of help each other out a little bit. So let's see. The next step I did on this was I actually had to tighten this up a little bit. And what I did was I ended up cutting people's arms off. That's exactly what I did.
Right.
Yes, that's why you need to keep your hands and arms and limbs, because I will cut them off.
It's kind of hard to handle.
Hard to handle. Uh-oh, I'm breaking stuff. So I'm going to forego showing you that. Let's see. And so I've already done that mask where I tightened it up, and I put a mask on the front to bring back the front of the train here a little bit. This is all going to make sense in a second, I promise. So I've got this guy, right? That's just the train. So I've masked this so there's no extra elements that'll ever get keyed out. And then underneath that, I'm going to put those effects that you just saw me doing with the people, with the keying the black sky out and stuff. So does that kind of make sense how I did that?
Get all your kind of your
Right.
edge details,
So-
and the floppies that hang off the sides.
Right. And one thing I realized working with some people is they like to do everything on one layer. They put 50 masks on there and key effects, and maybe they've got 1 or 2 layers. But the way I do things, I like to use one effect to get some color information or some alpha information, and then another effect to do another. And I'm trying to use as many effects as I can without masking, as little as possible, and layering it up. So I've got a bunch of different ways of generating my matte without getting rid of my people. So once you got that guy, we will drag that into a new comp. and I'm just going to just choke it a little bit with my bare hands using the mat choker. And all I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to get rid of some of that black edging around them. And maybe it's unnecessary, I don't know. But so, and the mat choker, if you haven't used it, is a pretty cool plugin. It'll go both ways here. So like I can go reverse and add or restrict a lot. And this top here, the softness is like how, it's not like feathering, it's more how accurate to the curvature of the pixels are. So this, it's trying to choke in exactly around here. And the more the softer I make it, the more it's like rounding out the mask, or the mat, or the choke, that makes sense. And then your gray level softness is like your feathering. So that probably works all right. So I've got that, I've got my mask, and now we're gonna go to the fun stuff, which is painting. Because if you look, and I want to go over painting a little bit because I feel like not a lot of people do it, and you don't want to do it if you can help it. But sometimes it cannot be helped.
You need to know what it
Well,
is
and
why to use it.
and that's why I kind of want to do this, is these are kind of core principles behind rotoscoping, and sometimes you just got to paint stuff out by your hands. There is a auto roto brush tool. I'll probably go over that later, but I wanted to show people the old school way a little bit, if you haven't seen that. So so this is the comp I had, right? I choked it, and then I've got that in here, right? So I've got no effects on here, and I like to pre-comp a lot. I don't know if you've noticed that. So painting, let me go over this real quick. Sometimes it's easier to go from your workspaces into the paint mode. So if you, what is it, alt-click? If you alt-click on a composition, it loads it up in your layer viewer. And it's important to do that and not your composition, because painting happens in a layer view and not the composition. I don't know why that is. Ask Adobe, but that's the way it is. So you get to your paint tools, your paint set, by clicking on the brush tool right here. And some people may think, I don't want to paint, I want to roto. But you can paint on specific channels. So you can do RGBA, RGB, or alpha. And all I care about is the alpha right now, right? So I'll just click on that. I'm going to need this. So I'm just going to go over this briefly because it is mind-numbing as well. So let's say here, like here's one. You could probably try rotoscoping this with masks, but the motion blur is kind of bleeding over the track, you know, and that'd be kind of hard to roto with the stuff I'm doing. So sometimes you just gotta paint it out here. So one quick shortcut here, if you hold Control, click and drag, no, just kidding. Command, click and drag, you can change the size of your brush. I don't know if there's an option like that for your hardness, but so it's kind of like Photoshop. If you've ever painted masks out in Photoshop, it's just like that. One other thing we need to change is the duration. You can set this for a bunch of different modes. If I write constant, this mark I make right here will be on the entire time, right? So here's the brush keyframe basically, and it's always there. But we don't want that because the footage changes from frame to frame. So I'm just gonna do single frame for now. But you can even do custom, like I want this to be on for a couple frames and then turn off. But right now, I'm just gonna kind of quickly show how this. And if you've got a Wacom tablet, this is a lot easier than a mouse because it's pressure sensitive, so I can do kind of different widths of the brush easily. So I'll spare you from doing all of this in front of you because I can already hear people yelling.
Yeah.
I hear you. So does that make sense how this works? Does anyone have questions on what I'm doing or why or?
I'm completely new to painting.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple once you kind of start using it. I mean, it's just a brush and you can just kind of control, it's just kind of up to you to control how long it's on. And so right here, I'm just kind of looking for the little fragments that my key tools have missed. Right, so there's a few. And I
listen to the ball as you're painting.
Oh yeah, that's right.
No,
The
is there
spring.
a way to see the alpha channel? Like,
Yeah, so if you hit Alt Option 4, you can see your alpha, which helps a lot. You know, but sometimes, like, I don't know if sometimes it's hard to tell what the alpha is and what it isn't. Another thing that helps a lot too is like, let's get here where it's kind of hard to tell where's the coaster start and end in the black. And you can kind of see it here, but I'm still not sure where it starts and ends. This guy right here, I don't know if you guys have ever used this, but this is like an exposure setting only for what you're looking at here. It doesn't actually render. It just helps for times like this where I need to see a little bit. Now I can start to see a little bit more of the edge, right? And paint that down and bump my hardness up a little bit. So, and then when I'm done with that kind of overexposed look, I can just click that to go back to 0. And it goes the other way too. So when you're painting, it kind of helps to go, kind of goes and passes too. Like I'll just look at one spot. Like I know this keeps popping up. And I'll just kind of scrub through and quickly wipe out stuff. And then, so does that make sense? Do we get painting? It's boring and nobody wants to ever do it.
Guys, usually when I bring up the painting menu, it has a split screen. But I saw that you moved one over. Did you do anything special there?
Like that?
Yeah.
So yeah, you could work like this too if you wanted. I'll use key light kind of in this type of mode. But yeah, you just click and drag and you can put these guys anywhere you want. You can get really, you can tab it out, you can put in different tabs, you can put them next to each other. It just kind of automatically builds the tabs for you if you want. Yeah.
That's something that can help a lot with, like you were saying earlier, with key light, with comping. And
Yeah.
if you have something that you're nudging around inside a pre-comp, then you can do your 2-window view and see your final comp, but also nudge around in your pre-comp to be able to see how it's working, but also what the end result is.
All right, so I'm going to switch back to the standard output here. And I've already got a comp where I've painted it out. And that green back there is just the background color here. I don't know if you guys ever do that. That's kind of handy sometimes to change that background color. It doesn't render green, but it kind of helps you, helps you see what's going on. So I have painted this out for the most part, and it gets pretty crazy, like if you really get into it.
1,300 some odd brush strokes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, But that's why I wanted to go over this stuff at the beginning, because yeah, I could paint that out by hand and I'd still be painting it 3 years later.
Could you talk about the tilde key real quick?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know what the tilde or grav key is. It's right underneath the escape. Whatever highlighted panel you're on, it maximizes. So when I click it, it just full screens that. So when I want to see more of my layer here, I can do that. You know, you can see my effects there.
The same way.
Yeah, Premiere is.
Like if they all are probably on that.
Yeah. They're kind of making them all work similarly.
Just
Which is
hover
nice.
over one of the panels. You don't have to click it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's whatever your cursor's over.
okay. I've been clicking on them. I'm wasting those that
And it's all about the time.
1/10 of a second here and there.
If you're looking to load all your
Man.
time up with rotoscoping, you
We'd
wanna
already be
save
done
those
with
settings.
this if I knew that, really, if you think about it. So, all right. There's the paint. So one thing I like to do too, so now you notice that the train's there, but the track isn't. And easy way of getting that track back in, you could do this in After Effects, but I like to, at least for locked off shots, this works. If the camera is moving, this won't work. You can select, like I'll select a frame where there's no train visible, and I'll just hit Control-Alt-S. Nope, Command-Alt-S. Sorry, I'm from Windows land. And what that is, it is the Save Frame As command. So Save Frame As, File, Command-Alt-S, same thing. And what I'm going to do is save this not as that, as a Photoshop. And it says Photoshop sequence, but when you're saving a frame, it's only going to save one frame. You don't have to worry about it rendering everything. And I'm going to put this, I'm just going to put this on the desktop for now. And I don't know if you guys have ever messed with these output settings at all down here. When you twirl this guy down, there's this fun post-render action. And you can set that to import. And now when I hit render, it automatically imports it right in here. So I don't have to run around asking myself, why didn't I save that in the right spot? And if you right click on this,
What's that under the render cube?
right here. So when you add something in, usually these arrows are closed up,
yeah.
but you can twirl these down and you get all these extra options. And if you do kind of misplace where you put stuff, you can always, after you've rendered something, twirl this down after and just click on this guy, and it pulls up the folder that you rendered your file out to. I use that a lot. So now that I've got this in here, I'm trying to, that's not right. Why is this rendering blue, Trent?
I'm not sure. Go back to your original movie that you rendered from.
Hey, real quick, what's the deal with the caps lock thing?
What's the deal with the caps lock? Caps lock allows you to, if you have a comp that is chock full of layers and effects and all kind of stuff, and you don't want to wait for it to render out everything, you just want to jump in and make an adjustment for some things, you hit the caps lock key and it keeps After Effects from rendering. So you can jump in, you know, rename things or whatever. You won't be able to see what's going on except for maybe bounding boxes. And then after you've done your changes or gotten rid of whatever is taking so long to render, then you click your caps lock off and that'll go back to rendering that frame.
So, all right. Now that I've got this in here, I've got my still frame and my coaster, and I just want to isolate the track here. And in After Effects, you can click on a layer and do Edit Original, Edit Original. And if this is, Not on this computer. You can do that.
Yeah, you can.
But how do you do that on here? Isn't that just usually launch Photoshop? You ever done that?
Yes.
Maybe you got to do it in this window.
I don't know why I wouldn't. Try it now.
So what's supposed to happen?
Now try it.
Now try it. It's not here either. You should be able to right click and it should be in here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on.
It's cursed. So usually what this happens is maybe if you upgraded to 2015, maybe.
I've been doing that.
Had to like rub that in there real
That's
quick.
CS3, y'all.
So if you did that and you hit edit original, usually what this does is it launches Photoshop and it automatically loads this into Photoshop like this. I usually don't have to do it. I just did. So then once you're in here, once you're in Photoshop, I'll try not to be in here too long because I know it's an After Effects club. You can hit W for your wand tool, the magical wand tool, and turn contiguous off. And what this is going to do is every color I click on, it's going to look for similar colors, and they don't need to be touching. If that makes sense. So that's
how you call it a club.
Yeah, I mean, motorcycle guys get clubs. We should get one.
Mickey Mouse has a club. We should have.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds professional, right? Or no? I don't know.
Now having seen the painting tool, I'm surprised Adobe
What was that
hasn't-
thing you did that selected all those colors?
It's called the Magic Wand tool. It's right over here. It's if you hit W on your keyboard.
I'm surprised that hasn't been added to After
Right.
Effects.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's gotta be on the list.
So this, has selected my black, and I won't go into
Thanks.
painstaking detail here, but you can, start to mask this off. And I like, setting my selections in Photoshop a lot more than After Effects. I think painting in here is a lot easier. You can even, if you hit Q, your selection turns into a mask, and you can use a brush tool and actually start to paint your selection away too. And then, so let's say this is perfect. It's not, but you can, obviously it's a perfect match.
Beautiful.
And normally if you had hit the edit tool, we'll see how this works. If you save it, if you Command S, save, and Command Tab back over to After Effects, it updates magically. So then if I had done that correctly, like this one, so that's one I cut out earlier. Yeah. So now I'm back in that comp that I did the painting in, and if I paste that Photoshop file in of just the track, so now I've got my train totally isolated, no bars, no sky, no nothing, and the last thing I like to do is I like to kind of cover up my mistakes with motion blur. I don't know if you guys make mistakes, but I do a lot of them. Motion blur hides all sins. Most
Blur
sins.
and duct tape.
Duct tape too. Over your client's eyes. That's where you got to put the duct tape. It's right here.
What the heck was that? What was that duct tape?
Oh, I'll explain that
You
later.
see on the web page? Oh, it was just being silly.
So now do you have this? Yes, in 2014 and up, After Effects has the pixel motion blur effect, which saves bad rotoscoping artists a lot of headache. And so now you can kind of see, that's a little crazy, but it kind of helps hide some of the hard edges that I
It's
did.
also going pretty fast, so
Right. And this was shot a little bit higher speed. So this is kind of a bad example right now because I think I went a little heavy on the choker, but yeah, the coaster's going pretty quick, and we shot it at a high speed, so it came out pretty crisp. So I always like to put a little bit of extra blur on it to kind of help hide those harsh edge mats.
If
Does that make
you were
sense?
gonna shoot something like this that you knew you were gonna have to work on this type of thing, would you want to shoot it with a slower frame rate?
I like to get the sharper edges because those, if I'm able to key or somehow, cut out a mat, it's a lot easier when the edges are sharp to cut those out than if they've been really blurred. And then
So
I can reintroduce motion blur
Yeah,
after the fact
makes sense.
pretty
That would
easily.
be a slower.
Higher
If you can, higher shutter speed and higher shutter speed and lower frame rate. Higher
Right.
frame rate. So you take both of them up, so your image doesn't have as much motion blur, but you're also capturing more frames.
Right. So, and if you,
can knock frames out.
yeah, if you are shooting high speed and you know you're not going to need it to be super slow, then don't rotoscope at that speed because
Yeah,
you're going
right.
to have 10 times
Speed
as
it
many
up and then
frames.
rotoscope.
Yeah. So, so here we've got the train pretty much cut out. We've used some masking, some weird mats and effects to key stuff out, and some paint, and then motion blur to hide my sins. Does that make sense? Do I need to? Is that working? Is that gelling?
What did you drop that into?
Ah, I'm glad you
Is
asked.
that your reel?
Maybe. I don't remember, actually. I don't know. Sorry, I can't answer that question right now. So I'm not going to say that. And so what I did after that was I rendered that out with an alpha channel. And I put it coming out of somebody's mouth. Absolutely.
Do you prefer to render out through animation or ProRes 443?
I prefer ProRes. Animation, the animation codec, I think gets a little grainy sometimes, or I've had some weird results with it from time to time. And
Can you show me the ProRes where you do that?
yeah, how to render that out.
Yeah.
So let
Is it
me.
just a render queue setting or what?
Is ProRes possible on a PC?
Not out of Adobe. No. Right. Yeah, if you're on a Windows, it's more tricky. See, please connect everything else. Okay, so as far as rendering out something in ProRes, like what you're asking about, like let's say I want to render this out. Go to composition, add to render queue, whatever that means. And so in here in your output module, you click on that guy, and this brings up, format. You can do different formats. I'm usually doing QuickTime. And then your format here is what flavor of QuickTime, right? So you've got a bunch of different ProRes options, but the only one that supports alpha channels is this one. See that? Hit OK. Oh. Hit OK. And then you got to make sure you come over here into your channels and set that to RGB and alpha. And I usually set that to straight. Hit OK. And you render it out wherever. And when it's done, it should look, what is going on? It should be all blue like that. And then you just cry yourself to sleep. It should look like that with an alpha. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So if you don't have that codec, you can't figure it out.
Yeah, and it
Say that again?
Apple ProRes is a codec.
Right, yeah.
So if you don't have it installed on your machine, you won't ever see it in your content.
right.
Oh, how do you get it?
Well, if you install Adobe, it should kind of come through, especially if you're on a Mac.
Yeah.
And you've got Adobe installed, you should have it.
Okay.
I think even on Windows, well, no, you can't render it out of Windows.
I'll look.
So if you're on a Windows, then you got to do
No, I'm on Mac.
so.
But Carl in the Google Hangout asked, what codec do you use on Windows?
I use DNX HD for when I'm rendering out stuff that's 1080 or lower. If I'm doing higher, like 2K, 4K, or weird resolutions, I'll use either DNX HR or Blackmagic's codec or something. And a lot of time, like it depends on what I'm doing with it, but sometimes I'll render out super uncompressed, even an image sequence sometimes. And then I'll convert that to ProRes. So you can convert anything to ProRes on a Windows computer with a program called FFmpeg. That's a whole nother rabbit trail I don't want to go down right now.
So the codec you use DN.
Avid makes it. It's part of their codec pack. It's a QuickTime codec. So
You just download it from their site. Is it free codec?
it is free. Yep, it's free. There's when it's just like a.
Go to Chrome.
Don't go to Chrome. Never go. Let's see if I can find it. They kind of hide it on their website. Click down. And it's this is probably not the right site. I've made a terrible mistake.
What if you don't click any of those buttons?
That is not it.
So let's try it. The newest one is 2.6. I'm looking for the download for 2.6, but because if you download some of these older ones, they don't have all the
Careful what you do your codecs.
right.
Yeah.
I downloaded this codec, and now my hard drive's empty. I don't know what happened. I don't want to. Maybe I'll post it later. But
Okay.
if you look around on the Avid site, there's a download link for DNX or their Avid DNX Codex 2.6. And the caveat with theirs is if you're rendering as DNX HD, it limits you to frame rates and resolutions. You have to pick which one you're rendering out to. And if you pick the wrong one, you get a crazy looking video. But it's like the compression scheme is very similar to ProRes. DNX HR is like ProRes 444 with very large file sizes from what I've seen. So those are your two options. They're not perfect, but I'll do something like that and then convert it later if I need to. So that was render and codec talk. Does anyone else have any other questions about that? No, moving on. So we've got our file in here now. And let's see if my zombie is in here. We shot this as DNG sequences. Has anybody worked with DNG before?
Yes, let's talk.
Let's talk. So I won't go into too much detail, but it's like camera raw. It's like a camera raw file out of a DSLR. It's kind of the equivalent. So when I bring it in, originally this is what it looks like. And we shot this guy. This is not a real zombie. It's just an actor, don't worry. He only ate one person. That's fine. So it's kind of dark. It's a little whatever.
What camera was it shot with?
F5, I think, Sony F5. It was a year ago.
So I'm working with those right now off an FS700,
Yeah.
and man, I'm really looking for a good workflow.
So
Always
it depends on how they've been recorded too, because there's different recorders out there that record DNG, and they're not all the same, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So After Effects usually can read it though. So when you dump it in, what's cool about it is you can go into Interpret Main, and you can go to this guy down here, More Options. Red footage is just like this too, by the way. And when you wait for the spinning ball to go away, it'll give you,
Comes in as image sequences?
yeah.
Really?
Well, that's how we did this one. So this is going to bring up the Camera Raw editor. If you guys have ever used DSLR raw files in Photoshop, it's going to look the exact same. It only takes like 25 more minutes. Okay, here we go. So this is pretty cool. You get a lot of control when you shoot like this. We shot pretty dark, so there's not a lot. The downside right now is it only shows you the first frame. So if you've ever gone in here, you have a lot of control over the different. You can add sharpening. You can select just certain colors. And this is the hue, so I can change the hue of just these reds. I can make them a little bit more green. And it's super, super slow to work with. So,
You know if the DNX HD files will work in Red CineX Pro, or is it just Red files?
I do not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are there any other color corrector apps you would use besides trying to do that in After Effects?
Resolve.
Okay.
Resolve is a free one that works. That understands most formats, I think. I don't know.
It was shot with an FS700.
Oh, there you go.
Real quick on this, is there a way you can in this particular box, can you choose another frame to base your editing on?
No.
You have the first frame.
So you can trick it, and I could go into, if I reveal in Finder, I could go in here and just grab a frame and drag it into a different folder. Right, so here, I'll show you that. I can copy this frame. I'm gonna paste it here. I'm gonna drag it in. I'm gonna wait for a while. Or not. There we go. So when you import DNGs, this automatically pops up.
Yeah.
So now my frame's a little bit different. I only picked 116 down the road, but this frame's a little different. So what you could do is say, I love this look where everything looks white. And I can go over here, and I don't know if it matters. It doesn't matter which one of these tabs you're in. You can click this guy right here and save your setting. Here's all the different, these are just all of these settings over here. You can just save that wherever you want. I can save it here.
Save it with your project.
I can, glad you brought that up.
Just hit the desktop drop down up at the top middle.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw it here right for now. So I hit OK, and now I can come in, and it takes, you saw it takes a while to bring up the editor.
Suffice it
But
to
I can
say
go in
you
that
should
back
apply.
that same way and load that setting onto other ones, which is what I did with this one. So this is the same footage, right? I just pumped the exposure up a little bit in that raw dialogue.
Yeah.
And then for our example today, I rendered that out as ProRes 444. Because the DNG sequences, you can see, just look, you can watch me scrub through this and then scrub through this. Works really great, right? So it's slow. You got to have fast disk to keep up with it.
Oh, bro, I'm doing it on USB too.
That's a horrible way to spend your life. Talk to me afterwards, though. I'll give you some tips. So I like I said in the last one, I like to first off, so I got my footage here, drag this guy into a comp, right? Just drag it in. And now I've got a comp that is automatically set to the length of the file. The frame rate's the same, the frame size is the same, and you can see we shot this one a little bit different frame size. And
You trim the time in this comp, or do you?
if I was smart, I would have. But these are all worthless, sorry. So, and I went against my rule and I affected the footage directly on this one, so you'll have to bear with me. But so this is the same thing. It's just, sorry. So it's the same comp. I got that ProRes file sitting in here. And this is the DNG one that I originally worked with. I'm just going to use this as reference so I don't get too lost. And this is where I did a little liquify work. Has anybody ever used the liquify tool, even in Photoshop? It's pretty fun. It's pretty wacky. And it's in After Effects, which is pretty cool. So what I want to do here is when he screams, I want to open his jaw up like the dentist does to me. But I want to make it look crazy. Not too crazy. You can drag this on, and it's kind of like the paint tool again. We got our brush, you know, you can hit command and drag and you can get a different size. And this will just smear the crap out of your footage. And it can give some pretty crazy results. So this tool is like a smear. You know, this one does waves. We got twirls, this puckers. So it'll make things smaller, and the bloat, which will make things bigger. So I'm gonna reset that. So I'm just gonna say right here, I want that jaw down lower. So I can just kind of start pulling this down. And if I use a small brush, what's gonna happen is it gets a little too detailed and it just takes forever. So you wanna, like I find it helps to use a little bit bigger brushes to start with. I wanna open that up. And what I'm trying to do too is I'm buying myself a little bit of room for that roller coaster to come out. You can even, you know, make him snarl a little bit. So I got my mouth a little bit wider there, and I can't interview. There we go. So his mouth's a little bit wider there. And one thing that kind of helps when you're in the liquify tool is looking at the mesh. So now you can see, you can kind of see what warping is taking place when. But one of the problems you're going to run into here is the mesh doesn't move, but my zombie does, right? So now that warping that's happening right around his mouth is staying in that same spot. But as he moves, now it's starting to warp his nose a little bit. And it's getting a little crazy. So one thing we can do here is I'm going to turn that effect off, maybe. Turn that off, and this offset, this distortion mesh offset, what it's going to do is you can use that to offset your distortion. So why doesn't this turn off? There we go. So one thing I did was the tracker. Keyboard shortcut for the tracker, Trent, quick.
It's right above the wizard.
Not the answer I was looking for, but I'll take it.
I haven't created my own shortcut.
Ooh. So I will click on my footage I want to track here, my zombie. And And I'm just going to hit motion. And all I'm trying to do is get X and Y motion data to keep my liquefy mesh over his mouth. So what's nice about him is he's got a lot of detail on his face, so you can kind of pick whatever spot you want to track. But sometimes, you know, you can do, sometimes the eyes are tough if they move, but sometimes you can do that. I'm just going to drop that on his mole there. And I'm going to track back. I kind of lost it there, but I don't really need it there. I only need the motion when his mouth is open. So I've done part of my track. You can see the data, the keyframe data it's generating here. I'm going to go there, and now I'm going to track forwards. There's not really a reason to start in the middle and go forwards and backwards for this. I just did it because I don't know why. So now I've got my data, right? I've got this little box that follows the mole. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a null. I'm just going to name this Mole Tracker The Revenge Part 2. Part 1 wasn't any good. And I just need position data. I don't need rotation and scale. And I'm going to say edit target Mole Tracker. Hit OK. Hit apply. X and Y, yep, okay. So now I've got a null object that follows his mole. And I've got my liquefy, which I moved frames on me. Usually you would track first and then do this. That's probably good. Turn my mesh on. That one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit UU, show my keyframe property, whatever property I have with keyframes. And then on my liquefy tool, I'm going to alt-click offset. And then I'm going to, that pops up right here. I'm going to drag up to here to position. And what that's going to do is throw it way off. Because I did this in the wrong order.
I have a trick for you. You ready?
Yes.
So go into your expression and do plus at the very end.
I'm getting to that.
Okay,
I'll get there. I want to show this first just to set the principle up. So I did this in the wrong order, so I just reset my liquefy. So I'm just going to do that. Quick. This is a little messy, but I think you get the point. So now I've got my liquefy tool that's expanding his mouth, and I've got it tracked to his mole, basically. So now when he moves, my mesh moves with him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what were the steps that you did to get it to attach to it?
So what I did was I tracked him first. You understand that?
Yep.
The tracking. So and I got my null with the position data here that's tracking with it. And then on the liquefy tool, this mesh offset, I just alt-clicked it to get my expression up. Right here, this guy.
Okay.
And then I just dragged this pick whip over here.
Okay, thanks.
So one thing you can do too is, let's see if I don't ruin this again, like what Trent I think was getting at. was, if I just type it in here, let's screw it up. If you do plus bracket, open bracket, oh boy.
You need to get your expression back. Just hit undo. There you go. You go to the end of it and do plus.
There we go. I just reset the expression. I'm going to do plus, open bracket. I don't know if this is what you're talking about, Trent, but now the next key that it's looking for is the X value. And I'm just going to drag that up here. I'm going to put a parentheses or whatever that is, a comma. I failed grammar. And do the Y. So now what this is doing is it's saying take this value and then add this value to this, and then add this value to this. So now what I can do is this tracks, my mesh tracks, and then I can go into my liquify tool, and then
Basically giving it.
I can adjust here too. So now I can animate my offset as well, which you do kind of need that extra control.
I'm going to give you one different way to do that.
Bring it on.
So go back to your expression. Just hit EE, and I'll show you only your expression. And so click in there and pick with the position of the mold tracker, the Revenge Part 2. Right there. And then do plus value.
Nice.
Value gives you whatever the value is of that particular property.
Or if you like typing more, you can do it my way. Whatever you want to do. Trent's not always right, guys. You guys
Trent's
didn't know
not
that.
always right.
This time he was. So I've got that, and the other problem we're going to run into here now is now I've got his mouth gaping at all times, but I don't want it always stretched. I just want it when he opens. So this fun value right here, the percentage, is a way you can animate on and off your liquify-ness. And what's cool is, what's that? It goes negative, or no, it doesn't go down there, but it'll go to, like, you can actually go over 100% and add more to what you were doing. Sometimes that helps. So I'm going to start with, let's see. I know I need it to start here. And then this bottom layer is just for reference for me. And then I'm gonna bump that up to 100. So now he's standing there, no distortion. And then when he opens it, then I'm animating that liquify effect. And now I got a large mouth. I don't know why that's not working.
Sometimes it double clicks. I think I've dropped my pen one too many times.
Yeah, so there you go, like that. And then I'm just gonna do the same thing over here, although I never ended up using this end of the shot. But I'm just gonna click that to drop another keyframe that's 100%.
You should have stuck this tongue out.
And then I'm just gonna bring that down to 100. So now I've got our guy screaming with a big mouth, and then it comes back down. So that's how I did that. And then I brought that into this comp. Right here.
Is that guy Bob McVick?
That is. That's his Christian name. So I brought that in here. I'm going to speed through this because I don't want to burn up too much more time here. But threw just kind of a loose mask around him, because what I realized was when I dropped the roller coaster in, which I put somewhere in here. All right, this is our roller coaster from before. Not that. All right. I'm gonna clean some of these up. Sorry, I got a lot of open comps. So that's our roller coaster we cut out from before, but it's a little bit wider than the frame. So what I did for this comp is I extended it out because I wasn't sure where my final framing was going to end up, where I wasn't sure where I was going to frame everything off. So I wanted to make it wider so I had wiggle room. So we drop our zombie in there, mask him off just loosely, and my roller coaster's sitting on there. And the masks we're putting on aren't anything special, right? They're just kind of garbage masks. But what I want them to do is wipe the coaster on. Does anyone want me to explain how I did this little chunk? I just animated a mask. That makes sense, right? And then I've got this extra mask here set to subtract to help kind of cut off some of the, oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. To help hide this little thing. So I just put a little mask here, subtract. And what's nice now is my shot's locked off. The coaster was locked off, so I don't really have to worry about animating a mask anymore. So now I've already got tracking data, right? We already tracked this guy. So I can copy this over here. And my timing in here doesn't line up the best, but if I paste it in here and I hit the open bracket key, it moves. Let me try to show this. It moves your layer wherever your cursor is, right? So if I hit that, it lines my in up to wherever my cursor is. If I hit the close bracket key, it does the out point. That's just how I moved that. So I've got tracking data from this comp, right? This frame here. It's now in here. So this, it's offset a little bit, but you don't need this to be on him. The data is going to match up. All I need is to parent my roller coaster to our tracker here. And what that's going to do is now my coaster's offset a little bit. But now my roller coaster moves with that mold that we tracked earlier. And kind of helps give the illusion that it's part of his throat or whatever. So when I've got that mask on there, that it's wiping it on.
So how'd you attach it like that again?
So I took the tracking data from the previous comp, right? You remember that?
Okay.
This null.
Yeah.
And I brought it into here, right? So that tracker is now right here. This is the same shot of our guy. He's just moved over to the right. And this is that null from that comp. And it's just a little farther to the left. But it doesn't matter where your tracker is. All I'm looking for is the motion it's providing me. So I've got that in here. And then I'm just taking my roller coaster here and I'm parenting it by dragging this to my tracker right here.
Okay, thanks.
And so now my roller coaster moves with my zombie. So that's kind of the bulk of that project. Like that was obviously the bigger part, probably the more time-consuming part. The next part was adding fire and all that fun stuff. And actually, I wanted to go over the reveal of this too. So I had a little glowy burst on the end of this, and all that was the word was too many times. My one mask, right? This, I'll try to change these to make it easier. So this first mask I made that wipes the coaster on. And all I did was I duplicated it, Command D, and I just selected my keyframes and moved them a little bit and set it to subtract. So now I've got just that little edge of the coaster peeking out. And I threw on a ton of glow and set this to add, and then set that on top of my other coaster here. So now when he shoots it out, the tip of the track kind of glowy. That makes sense?
Yeah, I like it.
And that kind of helps, you know, set it up or sink it in a little bit more when you start adding fire on. I don't remember how I did all this, so. So here is, this is just some stock footage of a fireball. And it was pre-keyed, but there's tons of websites with stock footage of fireballs at this point. So we threw that guy in, and I just put a mask on. And draw out the fire. Does that make sense? Does anybody want me to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Moving on. And then I've got I threw in some stock footage of these embers. And just kind of randomly piled them in. And I used that same mask or similar, I guess it's not the same. But so I set those to add mode as well. If it's on normal, it looks like that because there's no, these sparks haven't been keyed. Does everybody understand how the add mode works? The add blending mode? Just kind of puts your highlights in and gets rid of the black.
Say that again?
Do you know how that, so with like the blending mode, the add mode, you know how that works?
Yeah.
So I've got this footage that's shot on black, right? Let me, whoa.
It removes all the black.
Well, it doesn't remove it, but what it's doing is it's combining it.
Yeah, it's doing math on every pixel. It's a certain kind of math on every pixel. And for the multiply mode, doesn't do anything for pixels, but the brighter it gets, the more it combines, the more it adds to the luminance and saturation in add mode.
So I've got a red, I'll just do kind of a dark blue here. Dark blue solid, and then my footage of embers. Add mode is just going to say blend on top of whatever's beneath you, blend the pixels above a certain luminance range, which is usually above 50% gray, and it's going to do that in an order. It's not just going to do all the pixels. So when you hit add, it gives the appearance like I'm keying it and putting it on footage. Blend in with the footage.
Right.
The blend modes are broken into different sections. So like the top part It basically keeps all the darks. It's just a way that it looks at the pixels and how it overlays them on top. So the top keeps all the darks, kind of get rid of the brights. The add, lighten, those look at the bright, it gets rid of the black and kind of keeps the brights. Almost the opposite. And then the overlay, soft light, kind of looks at the mid-range. So it's a way to overlay stuff and kind of keep parts of the image and get rid of other parts by looking at the brightness value.
I use them all the time. I just don't know how they work.
Yeah. Neither do I. You just go with what looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I wish. I want to know, like.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's just the brights, the darks, the mids, and you just kind of it reacts differently with different layers. So you just kind of see.
and it is. I mean, they're basically math equations of if this pixel is this value, then it
Right.
works at this value on what's beneath it.
What is
sort of thing.
subtraction?
Oh, you don't want to do subtraction.
You don't really.
Oh no.
Once you go subtract,
It inverts.
you don't go
So
back.
if it's white, it's going to subtract.
Oh, wait, it doesn't subtract.
What's that? So one cool thing that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about here, but does have everything to do with blending modes, is one way you can kind of tell the difference between files is the difference mode. Have you guys ever used that? So I've got, this is the same two files, they're just converted. They're different codecs. And if my ProRes one on the top, I set to difference, it's only going to show you the pixels that are different than what's underneath. So if you want to experiment with different codecs to see how they're different, because if I'm just looking at this like this, oh yeah, they're the same. They're totally the same. But once you throw on difference, now you can crank this little thing up. You can start to see what actually is different. And a perfect translation will be totally black. That'll be completely black. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, that's cool.
That's a good thing.
So
Thank you for explaining it.
yeah. So we've got our embers in there, and I'm using the, I don't know why I did it this way, but I'm using a layer above it that had some masking done onto it to kind of control the burst of them coming out. I probably could have just put that same mask on the layer. I don't know why I did it like that. And I just kind of threw in a bunch of different ones. I mean, that's the thing with fire and embers. You just kind of try to layer up a bunch of different ones to get a lot of randomness in there. And then I'm just drawing masks to angle it out to the left. So long story short, fire, mask, good. And let's see if I'm missing anything. This adjustment layer is just kind of a little bit of color correction. And then from here, I took this comp and I threw it into this one that is 1080, 1920 by 1080. And I have just did a little bit more color. I crushed the blacks a little bit and animated them. So I want them to come up from blackness like this. And that was started with animating my exposure effect. Is everybody use the exposure? You know how that works? It's pretty cool. So you got your exposure and your gamma offset, and I don't want to go in, we're kind of short, but basically I was able to animate those 2 properties there,
So
and then just kind of reset them to 0.
when it comes to using exposure and going to Premiere, like you told me, not to use your in and out, like say fast color corrector, not to use your in and out. Is that the same as kind of what curves could do as far as keeping?
Yeah, curves could do the same.
But that's not going to screw your footage up using exposure.
No, and what I'm doing here is I'm destroying my footage and bringing it back. Right, I'm just kind of trying to crush it down a little bit. And sometimes I'll use exposure just when I'm trying to be a little bit quicker about it. With curves, you know, everybody knows what curves are, right? The curves effect.
And also that's the DNG sequence.
Like with curves, sometimes if I want to crush stuff down, I'll tweak this. And I found when I'm using curves, I get super detail oriented and lose time. And exposure just helps me move a little bit quicker. That's really the main reason I use it when I'm doing simple stuff like this.
That's a big dude. That guy's got a neck.
It's
all prosthetics. He was like this tall, and like 50 pounds.
That's why his neck's that way.
Casting was another big part of this. So, and then there's just a couple. So what I did here was animated a mask. Like so. Does this make sense? Does anybody want to explain that? That makes sense, right?
Yeah, so you're basically using the black masks to make it look like he's walking into the light.
I'm making it look like, yeah, like he's walking into light. When he never walked in the light, he was always lit. So
I only have one question. How in a storyboard meeting did y'all come up with, instead of a zombie bombing out a roller coaster?
it was actually in a sweat lodge. Yeah, no. Lots of peyote.
Somebody scheduled a yurt.
Yes, we got one at the office. It's great. You guys need to get one. So that's pretty much how that worked. The main thing I kind of wanted to show on this was just kind of rotoscoping techniques and how there's a lot of ways to go about rotoscoping, and none of them are necessarily wrong, but some of them will take you 100 hours longer to do. And you want to use as many keying and tracking effects as you can to help minimize the amount of keyframing and points, mask point animation you're doing. So,
Well, you're a genius.
Yeah.
so and that's it.
Big hand for Chad Gilmore. Okay.
I have a slight quick question.
Yeah. Jason, I don't know anything that you ask ever to be a quick question. Go ahead. Learn.
That's why he tells me to Google it. This is kind of a dude question, but can you explain the alpha mat?
Like the track mat?
Well,
Like what is an alpha?
yeah,
So you understand what red, green, and blue channels are?
yeah.
The fourth one is the alpha, which is just the transparency. It's just saying these pixels are transparent, these are opaque, and everything in between is like a blend.
Yeah, it's a grayscale image, basically, that where it's black, it's transparent. Where it's white, it's opaque. And then every shade in between is
Some
gradation between
Yeah.
transparent and solid.
Okay.
That makes sense. So this is where you can find us.
Oh, thanks.
So, Mr. Gilmore, how did you make that snake?
The snake was done in Cinema 4D.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
CG animation.
Yeah, this is After Effects. I bought the model on Turbo Squid,
Oh, okay.
so I didn't model it. I modeled the snake myself, and then when we looked at it, we promptly deleted it. The top one that somebody up there doing.
Well, we're just
So-
two
Yeah, it's just a tube.
eyeballs.
Here we are, thinking you wanted that. Maybe the
I'm just
scale
a
texture needs
total hack on things.
so giraffe.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Sure thing.
We sadly,
Yeah.
we will not